I've been trying to find a self help book in the last few years that would change the way I think and act in life. But all I've ever found has been boring, repetitive, and pretty useless books. I've tried dozens of the top rated self help books, and I haven't found a single book which doesn't seem like a money grabber once you actually read it. They're very boring to read, repeat the same idea and sentences 100 times, offer little to none real practical advice or exercises, and are way too long. Some of them just say to believe in yourself or in the universe, and they don't offer any real way to work on yourself and have more motivation or energy or passion. For example, You Are a Badass by Jen Cicero. Others offer some advice, which is backed by science, for example, Atomic Habits by James Clear, but it seems like they're stretching an 8,000 word article into a 70,000 word book. And all of them have been mega boring. On the other hand, I've read other nonfiction books like Sapiens or Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, which have been both enjoyable to read and have expanded my knowledge. Self help books proclaim to be the way to change your life, but until the only thing they have done to me is disappoint me. I'd like to know your opinion in this topic and whether you've had different experiences with this genre of books. Okay, so this is very, very interesting because over the last 6 years, I've also read hundreds of self help books, but I've grown the most from the fiction books that I've explored. It's not that self help hasn't been valuable. Reading self help can touch your habits, your routines, your skills, but it rarely touches your soul. And in this video, I wanted to share my own experience on why fiction has been so powerful for my self growth when I was a college freshman and after, and also how you can begin tapping into it yourself. Don't get me wrong, self help is incredible for certain contexts, certain seasons of your life, but I think fiction can be even more powerful. So let's answer that question first. Why is fiction so powerful for self growth, right? What makes it unique to self help? There's three cool reasons, and they're pretty unexpected. The first is that fiction taps you into participatory knowing. Problem is that most self-help is only practical knowing. These are two types of knowing which I explore in my theory of knowing and learning, spiral knowing. Practical knowing is knowing how to do something, as well as your relative evaluations of a thing. How to do something can be riding a bike, swimming, driving, dancing, making very pretentious YouTube videos for college freshmen. It can also be your relative evaluation of something, like how good you think a certain self-help book is, how good you are at cooking a certain recipe, if a math equation is the best one to use for a certain context. So it can also be relative judgments about things. Self-help mostly targets that form of knowing. It's practical. That's why it's called practical knowing. I know I'm so good at naming things. Participatory knowing, however, is about your relationship to a thing. It's how to be in a certain context, not just how to act inside of it. This is how to be a college student. What is it like to be you in your certain college, in your certain major? What is it like to be an incredible video gamer, an incredible tennis player? If you suddenly went to Mars or a different country, what is it like to participate in that culture compared to your own? And this is what fiction is incredible at. It puts you in other shoes, other contexts where you have to participate in that in order to be able to engage in the fiction book. And so it gets at a deeper level of knowing than a lot of self-help does, because practical knowing is grounded in participatory knowing. The second thing that makes fiction freaking awesome is it strengthens your attention span. That's right. The greatest antidote to doom scrolling is reading the Stormlight Archives. Because if you do end up reading that series, you will literally never exit your bedroom because it is 1,200 pages long, every single one, and there's 5 of them. And I've read them over 3 times because I'm a madman. It is deeply boring at first to read fiction if you haven't built the skill of doing it. But it's so incredible for your attention span because of that, because you're forced to just read these little black specks on a white page instead of being stimulated by all the different things that you are when you're watching a video. And then finally, the third is that it helps you see the developmental nature of growth. This is something that we've explored in other parts of the channel, like my ego development map for college freshmen. But the point is that development takes place in predictable stages. And inside of fiction, you can actually reverse engineer where characters, where entire societies are at on this developmental map in order to grow yourself across the map as well. Because these characters often aren't in the same development that we are. They might be lower, they might be higher. A lot of the time they're lower, and I hope they are, because a lot of fiction is in fantasy medieval times. So if they were developmentally higher than we are now, then we should be a little bit concerned. So those are the 3 reasons that fiction is so powerful for self-growth. Now, how do we actually use it for self-growth? The first powerful technique is to see yourself in the characters. I'm going to give you 3 examples of characters that I see myself in fiction I've read so that you get an idea. Firstly, we have the Age of Madness trilogy, one of my favorites. I just finished it for a 3rd time. Orso is a character that I resonate deeply with. I'll try to be as spoiler-free as possible, but he is the crown prince to the Union, the strongest conglomerate of different societies that have banded together into an alliance in the whole circle of the world. He is fed a silver spoon so far up his ass that if he yawned, you would be able to see the tip in his mouth. And despite being a pretentious little prince that is very obnoxious, he is so inherently good on the inside. But so many people around him aren't. He is surrounded by sharks. And he uses humor as a defense mechanism to all of the terrible things that happen in the world, especially by those around him that do terrible things that he is not at fault for. There's this one sentence he says repeatedly, "I hate bloody hangings." And he says that every single time there's a hanging. I know. It's pretty sad, but I see myself in the character so resonantly because he is trying so hard in a world that is not helping him try. And he uses humor as a defense mechanism in order to navigate that, which I do as well, as you might be able to tell in, that rhymed, as you might be able to tell in these videos. I use humor a lot to try and be a little bit more fun of a teacher, but also because it's a defense mechanism of mine when I get stressed. So I see myself in Orso. I also see myself in Dalinar in the Stormlight Archives. Dalinar is a high prince of Alethkar in the Stormlight Archives, and he is, or Kholinar is what I should have said. He is deeply troubled because he sees that a threat is coming, a big threat, unlike none ever seen before from the Voidbringers in the Stormlit Archives. But nobody around him really takes it seriously. They're partying and they're fighting their little games with each other, their little political games, and he's trying to unite everyone together to stand against this threat. And in doing that, he often comes across as self-righteous because he wants to make the world a better place, but nobody else around him is following it. And he struggles immensely with grief, with an avoidance of this past pain that he inflicted on himself through the bad person that he used to be. He struggles with that all the time, asking himself, can he be a better person even with the bad he's done? And I really resonate with his character, partly because of that self-righteousness that I definitely used to have more of than now, I think. And also that struggle with grief. Last 5 years or so, I've had a few experiences that have been pretty traumatic, and struggling with forgiveness and integration of those has been a big part of my spiritual journey. So seeing Dalinar go through it himself with something definitely worse, it doesn't get much worse than what he did, it really resonates. Then finally we have Siddhartha from Siddhartha. I know, whoever named him in the book, Hermann Hesse, freaking genius. So what I resonate with Siddhartha is he's a Buddhist child of one of the most popular and well-meaning and wise, enlightened Buddhists of his entire town. He gets brought up in this culture his whole life. Everything seems great. It's peaceful. It's meditating, on his way to enlightenment. And then he decides, I feel like there's more to life than this. So he sets out on an epic adventure, an odyssey, where he changes a lot, stops being Buddhist for a while, and learns many, many things about what true wisdom is. Some of the ways I see myself in him is there's a part of his story where he sees the world too much like a game. It's right after he stops being a Buddha, or he leaves the village, and there's this one beautiful passage where he describes himself entering a town and not being able to take any of the suffering of the people he sees seriously because he sees them wrapped up in their attachments and their games, and he's sort of 3 feet away from his body at all times. And then hilariously, he takes the other spin where after he does that too much, he's attached to not being attached, you could say. He gets way too immersed in pleasure and he starts gambling and having sex and drinking wine and all these things. And where I see myself in him is this beautiful midpoint that he tries to get towards the end of the book, where he finds beauty even in desire and suffering. He's not attached to not being attached. He is just flowing with life. It's very easy when you first get into Buddhism to think that attachment to non-attachment is the goal, or that non-attachment to everything is the goal, but then you get attached to that. And I made both of his mistakes on my journey. There was one point where I was way too much like a game, and one point where I was way too immersed in pleasure when I was a high schooler playing video games all the time. So Siddhartha, Dalinar, Orso, I see myself in all of them. And some questions you can ask yourself with the fiction that you read is, 1, how am I similar and different from this character? 2, what can I learn from this character's journey? And finally, what about this character do I want to embody more or embody less? If that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend you check out my free college freshman cosmic journaling kit. This is a journaling system with over 1,000 questions that will help you grow your emotional intelligence, your self-understanding, and your purpose. Not directly related to reading fiction, but by understanding yourself better, you'll be able to understand the characters you read better, the stories you read, and that feeds into this beautiful circular loop. So you can check that out in the description below if it sounds fun. That's the first way to get growth out of fiction. But another beautiful thing you can do is dissect the book. We've talked about the characters, but what about the book itself? The society, the themes, the whatnot. Let me give you some examples again. So in the Age of Madness, some of the main things I learned from dissecting the book is there is no good or evil. There is just people with good reasons labeling everyone who disagrees as evil. You really see that in the book. Every person has semi good reasons to great reasons for what they do, even if they're dark, but you understand why they did it because of their upbringing. You also learn from that book that history is written by the winners. There's so many funny things that they do to show this. Like, for example, the characters will often repeat quotes from famous people in the past, like Stolicus is my favorite, and they'll often say, like, what was it Stolicus had said? Better to do it than live with the fear of it. And the best part is some characters take that quote very seriously, and some also know that it's utter rubbish. And Stolicus was probably a piece of shit, but because of history and he won, he gets to have these quotes. And the last thing I learned from that book is the power of dark psychology, if you're not aware of it. Wow, is that abused in many of the characters. In the Stormlight Archives, major theme is journey before destination. It's literally the thing that the Knights Radiant have to swear in order to get their powers, is they promise they will prioritize the journey over the destination. It's very cliche, but the principle in real life is to love the process more than the result. Not ignoring the result entirely. That's also probably not a good idea. But not getting so caught up in it that you forget to take joy in the moment. And I remember I read this during a time where I was first read it, because I read it 3 times, when I was very productivity focused and deep work oriented. And this helped me get a little out of that self-work bubble, self-help bubble. In Siddhartha, one of the main themes I got is wisdom cannot be taught, only seeded. If you look at some of the things that the Buddha Siddhartha learns throughout his journey, he actually was told or kind of conceptually knew it from the beginning, but he had to embody it. He had to experience it in order to learn it. This isn't to say that wisdom can't be helped, facilitated by someone really wise, but it's more of a seed than it is a here's wisdom, go ahead. I mean, if only these conscious college videos worked like that. I told you some stuff and then boom, it's done. You've got it. That would be great. You could just binge watch them all and then your life would be figured out. So there's more, of course, to those books, but some questions that you can ask yourself is, what are the themes of this book? How might this book comment or relate to our modern society? How might I embody these lessons in my own life? When was this book written? How might this affect the book? And how is this book different from this other book? Why might it be that way? It's not just dissecting one book, it's doing syntopical reading, which is what Mortimer J. Adler calls it, where you start comparing books to each other and see how the meta commentary comes through, like comparing Age of Madness to Stormlight, where Age of Madness is a much darker world. And then you ask, well, why is it a darker world? It's not just the author's tone, it's also the context of the society makes it darker, because magic isn't given to you based off of your self-understanding like it is in Stormlight. It's just you have it or not. And also you can make dark pacts with devils in order to get it to a greater degree. So there's literally the dark side in a way that there isn't as much. There is still a dark side in the Stormlight Archives, but not as much as in the Age of Madness. And then we have the last way you can get self-growth from fiction, which is probably my favorite right now, and the one that most people watching this haven't done because it's so hard. And that is write your own fiction. Write your own story. I have been profoundly impacted by this the last month in particular. I decided, hey, I have this month before my master's degree starts. Let me write a freaking novel. Maybe not the whole thing in 1 month. That I would not be able to do that, but I can get a good stab inside of it. I've always wanted to do this. It's on my bucket list. And the profound thing that I realized is that writing your own novel is like diving into yourself in the weirdest manner possible, because each of the characters has a part of you in it. And then you start talking to the characters, the characters start talking to each other, and you realize you're just talking to yourself. Really, if someone watched me while I was writing a novel, they would definitely, I mean, if they don't think I'm crazy already looking at these videos, they would definitely think I'm crazy from the novel writing, because I literally just speak out loud to myself and then laugh as I make jokes. So yeah, the reason it's so powerful is you can write yourself as the characters and then make them go on the growth journey that you want to go on, or a different one just to learn more about that growth journey. So to give you an example, I have three main characters in the novel I'm writing. It's called the Chronophiles, and each of them embodies me in a different way. So we have Varela, a chronoscientist and Chronos priest, who is deeply invested in trying to uncover the mystery of why Kronos, the god of time, has disappeared the last 200 years. She wants to prove that he is still alive with chronoscience so that the rest of society will go back to being spiritual and not so deeply materialistic and uncommunal. I see myself in her because of her spirituality, of course, but also she's blindly compassionate. She helps everyone that she can, sacrifices her own health for it, and she needs to learn to grow spiritually without bypassing, as well as how to be a healthy mentor, because one of the characters, Alaro, latches onto her pretty early on in the novel and sees her as a mentor figure. Then we have Yoro, who's inspired a lot by Orso from the Age of Madness, as you could probably tell by the naming. And he's also a crown prince and heir to the prime, the crown, as it's called in the story, who is learning to take radical responsibility for their life. He has so many aspirations and is inherently good, but he can't get them done because the people around him are incompetent, or he is incompetent and doesn't realize it because he's so arrogant. And he's also learning to build a more spiritual relationship to life. He's more atheistic because he sees the world as very corrupt. And it'll be partly interaction with Verla that helps him build more of that spiritual underbelly. And then finally, we have Maven, who is a heart. There's two places in the society, crown and heart. Crown is like the rich folks area, and the heart is everyone else. And Maven is the POV character in the heart. He is a miner in the heart mines, the worst position you probably could have in the heart society, constantly going down and mining for chronite. And he's learning, he's the oldest character. He's 30 instead of 27 for Euro and 25 for Verla. And he is interesting because he is an old soul who feels like their life has already really ended. He had his vigor, energetic moment when he was 22, very angry and spiteful towards the world and wanted to change things. And then that did not go well in the heart. And now he's kind of trapped in the past. He's turning with the tracks, as he says. It's literally what he says, his character, and trying to learn, what does it mean to accept your fate in life, but also to try and channel his anger and his energy healthily in his older age, to learn to do that in a manner that doesn't destroy in the same way as when he was 22. And he's also the least developed of the three in terms of human development, in that he's quite unaware of the systemic nature of evil. So he blames the crown for the bad things that have happened to his life, but he doesn't realize that it's really not any individual crown member that's at fault, but the system perpetuating the challenges. And so writing myself in these characters has helped me grow into them as well. And I highly recommend, even if it's just a short story instead of a novel, trying it out yourself, experimenting with some characters, and really, really exploring a different way of journaling. So, self-help is cool. Don't get me wrong. And I I think that it's a great way to grow in some areas, but as the Reddit post that we read at the beginning elaborates on, sometimes it can get a little boring and feel a little trite. And so fiction reading gives us a way to go a little deeper, to get into the participatory knowing of fiction, to get into a better attention span, to see the developmental nature of humanity. By seeing ourselves in the characters, by dissecting the book, by writing our own fiction, the insight that I want to leave you on is your whole life is a fiction book. It just takes place over a longer time instead of 120, 200, 400, or ghastly 1,200 pages of the Stormlight Archives. It takes place over years, of decades. So the question is, are you going to take control of your own fiction story by reading fiction itself? That's it. If you like this video, check out my college freshman cosmic journaling kit in the description below. This is a gamified journaling system that helps you grow your emotional intelligence, your self-understanding, and your purpose in 1,000 journaling questions, just 15 minutes a day. It'll help you build the understanding you need to dive into fiction deeper. As always, I hope you have a fantastic, phenomenal rest of your day. Eat some peanut butter, and bye-bye.